Good morning. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart, and I know many people feel the same. It's a pleasure to introduce a great panel. We've tried to, as you'll see, put representatives from the main parts of this ecosystem and supply chain on stage for you to talk about industrializing dual chamber, not just device and primary package technology, but the fill finish of it. And these two things go hand in hand, as we all know. So it's a pleasure to introduce Courtney Nicholas Sutton, Associate Director of Device Development at AZ. Doug Bryan, CEO and President of Brylan LLC. And Joanne Melee, who is the Chief Commercial Officer at Dara Pharmaceutical Equipment Manufacturing. And I'm John Murridge, Chief Commercial Officer of Credence Med Systems. So first, thanks to Valerie and Meredith and Andrew. You know, it has been conference season, as many of you know, from CPHI to PDA to PODD, but PODD's our favorite, so we're happy to be here. Thanks very much. All right, we're gonna try and leave time for questions, but we'll see if we get lucky enough to do that. You know, I think there are times along Credence's dual chamber journey where we thought we were screaming into a very stiff headwind about dual chamber. And what has changed in really the last 2 years is dramatic, and now it is a tailwind. And I think there's a lot of conversation about it. There's a lot of pipeline activity that require it. And so some of the things that have changed, you've been hearing about all conference, right? Administration moving to the home and naive users needing to be able to inject complex drug products. The massive tailwind that is obesity and diabetes and what those pipelines are calling for, both in terms of constituents that don't always play well together, but also just the sheer number of units that are projected. The desire to reduce cost and eliminate cold chain. So these are the macro trends that are pushing us, and we're going to talk about more from a farmer perspective what the pipeline drivers are, using obesity and diabetes as an example, but very relevant for other therapeutic areas. We're going to talk about the challenges and the respective solutions that come from a machine manufacturer, that come from a CMO doing fill finish, and a device/primary package solution. And then we're going to look ahead for 5 years and say what's coming, right? So that's the goal of this little 25-minute, or now 22-minute session. So I should shut up and start asking the panelists. So Courtney, starting with pharma, tell us from your perspective what's driving it in terms of pipeline, and you know, what does the typical program or product look like in terms of viscosities and volumes and things like that?
Thanks, John. So as we look at the need and really defining that need and what's driving it, you think about what we've been hearing throughout this conference and is really prevalent in the industry right now in that weight management space. And as we look at next generation products there's a lot of different combinations that are emerging. And with that, in the cardiovascular, renal, and metabolic space, historically, fixed dose combinations are quite popular, right? And historically, those really have been in oral solid dosage forms. But of course, teams are getting innovative and they're thinking, how can we apply that into our parenteral products as well? And so as they look at how we can have combinations, a lot of times these products started off as monotherapies, and their formulations are for them to be by themselves in solution. And when you try to combine them, that doesn't always go smoothly. Or they may be different modalities that don't play along with one another. And so that conversation arises. First and foremost, of course, you want to co-formulate them, but what happens when you can't do that? And it's a pretty common question, I think, and of course everyone looks to the device to solve that, and that's how we get to dual chamber ultimately.
So viscosities are we talking about high viscosities, fairly low viscosities, injection volumes? What are we looking at?
Yeah, I mean, for today's conversation, I think really the discussion revolves around, our lower viscosities in this space. Of course, you could include everything, but to focus the conversation, I think water-like viscosities as well as lower volumes, so under 2 ml total between the two. And of course, we're talking about subcutaneous delivery as our route of administration.
Right. So the theme here is dual chambers, 2 words, but it can mean a million things, right? It can mean reconstitution, it can mean sequential injection of 2 liquids, it can mean various viscosities and volumes with a needle, without a needle, in a cartridge, in a syringe. And that's part of the complexity that Joanne and Doug are going to have to speak to, and part of the complexity we live with in terms of the device and the primary package. Sherry brought it up, and this is a topic we discussed. The sheer unit volume forecasts are requiring industrialization at a certain capacity where the lead time is too long to wait until the molecule reveals itself, right? And so it's a timing issue and an investment strategy and investment at risk strategy discussion. So, that's a perfect segue, I think, to Joanne. From, starting now upstream in the supply chain at the equipment manufacturer, you guys have a lot of experience in dual chamber. What are your biggest challenges as you try and serve this emerging market, and how are you guys doing it? What are your solutions?
Well, thank you. Current situation we are facing in the market is ideas are not very clear on the type of device it's going to be needed. So there are several solutions depending manufacturers. You could have like liquid, powder liquid, freeze-dried and liquid. There are syringes with 3 plungers, syringes with 1 plunger and 1 bypass. There are manufacturers using a standard syringe with 1 plunger. And all these combinations is what makes the final solution difficult. As a machine manufacturer, we try to be flexible. We try to put modular construction of machinery to manage as many formats as possible. But the key thing for us is to get things defined. And this, which seems easy, is not that easy. Because at the end, what's the best device for each drug is what is complex to define today. And device manufacturers are still developing things very fast. And sometimes happens that you start manufacturing a machine for a device, and after 6 months that changes. And that's an impact on planning and on cost.
And that's farmers' fault, let's be very clear. I'm kidding, right? But it all starts upstream, and these pipelines just are not yet defined. The injection volumes, the viscosities maybe to a lesser extent. So that's driving complexity in all of our lives, right? And so how do you guys approach that? How do you keep the device manufacturers and the pharma manufacturers within the rails?
Well, nowadays, this type of projects, we try to evaluate what's needed today and what's going to be needed in future. We have a modular way of building machinery in order to combine several operations, which allows to assemble current devices, but to leave as well space for other options. So nowadays, the combi machinery, which combines dual chamber syringes, dual chamber cartridges, but as well vial syringe and cartridge single chamber, that makes feasible investments that for the dual chamber only would not be really moving forward. So this modularity needs to foresee what combination of operations needs to be done in that piece of equipment. The problem is more modularity becomes in a bigger machinery in a higher investment. So at the end you need to find a balance on what could happen in future and what you need today. But on double chamber syringes, we really need to have a very close approach with customers and understand what they really need.
Yeah, and sorry, you're jumping in, but we're going right to you, Doug. Joanne mentioned if you want more flexibility, that drives cost somewhat up on the machine because you can implement in stages. But then when it shows up at your shop and you're putting it into a clean room that's got a certain amount of space and you're trying to run 15 different configurations, how do you handle that?
Yeah, so thanks. So just for thanks for being here today. It's my first pod conference, and look forward to some more. So just brief background. Bryland's focus is predominantly complex drug device combinations. So we don't really do any simple products. I started the company with that focus. Today, we're really looking at dual chamber and multi-chamber components. So that's cartridges, bags, syringes, powders, and liquids. We've got capabilities to do all of those, and it took some time to get there. To the question, and it's the same as Joanne, we have to start with a flexible system. So, because of all the different designs. So we have isolator technology that's highly contained, highly flexible, gives us the opportunity to do aseptic filling of a whole range of different components. And so it's not just simply saying, well, we're going to do one type of device. Because of the innovation that on here today, we are capable of taking lots of different syringes, vials, cartridges, bags, and developing a fill finish process in our system to do that. That flexibility is great for the scale that we're working at. It's great to get projects started, and we have a lot of different interesting opportunities between liquid-liquid, powder-liquid, bags, 505(b)(2s, NCEs. All of these are coming through a door. Maybe one of the few folks in the US that can do this type of work, hence the interest. So we've got a lot of flexibility, we have a lot of capability, but we're limited in scale for all the reasons that we're touching on with regards to at what point and who pulls the trigger on the industrialization. And what specifically do we industrialize to support all of the innovation? Is it dual chamber syringe, but is that syringe from Credence going to be the same for someone else? Can he build a line that has that flexibility? Can then we develop aseptic process within that line to meet a whole range of different components? And if not, does that mean we have to put 1, 2, 3, 4 lines into a facility? And then we're talking about a different cost point. And so all of these innovations are going on today. It's really about how do we take that from a fill finish point of view, and just some of those products actually are not aseptically filled, which has another slight degree of complexity. They're non-sterile fill and then gamma radiator re-beamed to sterilize. So there's another, and we have that complexity today we're dealing with. So it's not an easy situation and not easy to solve. However, we do have the ability to do that work today, and I think as we move forward, it's going to become an even more complex issue.
Yeah, I mean, so we're in Boston, right? I live in the suburbs of Boston, even though I'm a Yankees fan, which is its own challenge, given that they're down 3-0. I bring this up because Theo Epstein was the general manager of the Red Sox several years ago before they won the World Series for the first time in 100 years. And he said, winning in baseball is a multivariable problem. And this is a multivariable problem. And what's cool is that you've got an equipment manufacturer saying they can do it. You've got a fill finish saying they can do it. You've got a device and package company that says we can do it. And you've got a farmer that's saying we need it, right? That's a big difference from 5 years ago. And so we're all smart people, we're gonna fix this. The challenge is what first and when, right? So let's start looking forward in the next 5 years, right? Let's start coming back to you, Courtney. What does pharma, and you're gonna speak for the entire pharmaceutical industry right here, no problem. But what do you need to see? Like, what do you need to see to begin investing, to get beyond feasibility? Does it need to be a installed line running the exact configuration? How do we lower the risk enough to start the dollars running in the right direction?
It's a really good question, and I'm not here to speak on behalf of all of pharma. I think the key is really being able to see that line, to that path to the finish line. And to the point that was made earlier, there's a lot of hesitancy to make these significant investments upfront before you have data readouts. And in the last panel, there was a lot of discussion about needing those champions within the business to be able to make any investments that early. So having some de-risked aspects there, and being able to see the pathway, I I think the other thing is collaboration. As you said, in these individual segments of the industry, everybody understands that there's a need and there's potential solutions. But we have to be creative and collaborate to be able to get to the other side of it. And so having, the pharma company, the fill finish equipment manufacturer, the fill finish CMO, the primary container partner, the device partner, all coming to the table and collaborating on those interfaces which really present the risks. That is also key. So it's a bit of how can we get through the investment challenges and how can we manage these risks collaboratively?
Yeah, the way I think about it and the way we think about it is kind of like a pyramid, right? In the lower part of the pyramid, you need wide flexibility. You need to be able to do a lot of things because I like to think about the drug needs are going to reveal themselves in time, but we have to buy that flexibility up front, right? And then as we get more mature and as unit volumes for any particular application go up, then the capabilities and configurations of the machine and of the fill finish and of the device need to get narrow because you're scaling, right? So Doug, as you think about implementing that, you guys are, you've got some very flexible capabilities today. You're also in growth mode and you're thinking about what's going in your clean rooms in the next 5 years. What is your thinking in terms of how the next 5 years look from the fill finish perspective?
Yeah, thanks. So just maybe go back to, the partnership, the innovation. I think to get started, someone has to de-risk, in my case, fill finish, right? So Brian and I took the decision to de-risk a facility that would provide the flexibility to do this work by investing in that capacity. That in 2017 we had one interest in dual chamber. In Q2 of this year we had 8 inquiries into dual chamber, and that's based on the capabilities that we now have and demonstrated. That gives the platform for people to get started. I think to your question, so the projects that we're working on now have been de-risked. The understanding of the fill finish process has been developed. The next risk is really about the regulatory approval risk from getting the product through the regulators. The scale up in the next 5 years of capacity is really a commercial decision, because I think the products are getting to the point now where there's acceptance, there's going to be an approval from the agency, whether it's a bag or a syringe, and then really it's about understanding what is the scale that I need to get to for this product. And as an investor and owner of the company, we're willing to invest in that next stage, but we're not going to do that independently now, as we have done in the past. It's really about finding the consortium of people who want to be, participate in that scale. And then really the selection is, what are we going to put in there, right? I mean, there's so many different options, so many different opportunities. We have to select that, or there's large consortiums investing in lots of different technologies, all in one facility, which is capable within a Brian facility, and then we have to partner with folks like Joanne and his team to be able to do that. I would say that the next 5 years looks like large-scale industrialization will happen. It really is not. It's not going to happen. It really is. What is it that's going to be industrialized, and what is the scale of that looking like over the next few years? Because I think the unit numbers continue to grow. I started to design work on a dual chamber syringe line that was 10 million units. Now we're at close to 70 million, because every time I do a design, you come along and say, oh, we have another project. So we just have to keep adding to it. So I think that is part of the challenge. Whatever scale we select will probably be wrong, but at least it will be the start of industrialization.
Yeah. So I'm going to come to you, Joanne, in a second, but I think we are going to have room for a question or two. So if you've got some, please cue them up. So Joanne, the equipment manufacturer, especially in this particular discussion, carries a lot of weight, right? And as I say to my 17-year-old kid, it's the Superman, you know, with great power comes great responsibility, right? One of those things. How do you keep us moving forward? Your machines can do a million different things, but it might not be the best thing to try and implement everything at once. How do you guide that discussion? What are your suggestions? Because you've got machines out that are being used for dual chamber. How do you guide us in terms of order of implementation if someone is starting from scratch?
Well, as machine manufacturer, we used to follow customer requests. So at the end, we build the machine that is needed. From our point of view, we think market needs to standardize formats. In pharma, we come from formats which are extremely standard. Vial, syringe, and cartridge are fully regulated. So as machine manufacturer, it's the same. So we could manage these formats from any manufacturer, and it works with few format parts adjustments. But when getting into double chamber, this is a new field. Each manufacturer has a complete new device. So our market tries to standardize, or you are going to make us rich. Because if anyone needs a new machine for a specific purpose, that's great, but be ready for delivery times. Because in any machine takes 12 to 18 months on manufacturing when we work on the customization. So for me, CDMOs are key to start growing this market, because pharma industry today is not having the volume to invest by their own on a full complete line. These lines are extremely expensive, not only for the machine, for the validation and for the regulations that are needed to comply with GMPs and Annex 1s and all documentation related. But at the end, growing through CDMOs and standardization of formats is the key to really get into the double chamber devices, which seems is the future for the complex drugs.
Excellent. Okay, we have a few minutes. I can't see into the audience. No questions? You tell me. Okay, then can I continue to babble for a little while longer? Excellent. You flag us off. 2 minutes. when we, taking my moderator hat off and putting my device manufacturer hat on, when you're standing at a booth and you're talking to engineers and they're thinking about pipelines, the flexibility is great, right? The operations people in the room, flexibility is bad, right? Or challenging. Let's say challenging. I think as, there are ways via collaboration, via sharing the risk across not just the supply chain, but also multiple pharma, or even multiple package and multiple CMO. There are ways to mitigate the risk and enable the upfront investment, right? To start going up that pyramid. And so drawing the lines between where do you stop trying to solve every problem and where do you say, this is the URS, we're starting here, and we'll do the next one later. I think that's the biggest responsibility that we have in terms of guiding our customers. So, parting comments, anyone?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's I sit here today with 11 or 12 different components that could all be scaled. That's a major challenge to be able to do that type of work, right? So we have to select or standardize, or everybody has to participate in innovation, right? So I can't individually support all of that work, all of that equipment, but if somebody wants a bag versus a syringe versus a cartridge or their device, then that's the partnership, and those partnerships are developing and more than they've ever done before. And then I think the flexibility is great today, but ultimately we've got to get to validation and standardization and throughput and COGS, and those are the discussions that have to happen next, across all of the components to see that may actually determine which things are viable, which are not. And those aren't really happening to the level we need to get, as we have historically for lots of other, materials we know. So.
Parting comment, Joanne?
No, for me, this today's hearing PODD, I saw that the market is really moving forward. New drugs and molecules are really coming to market. This is good, and this as well push us on supplying solutions to the supply chain, because once the molecule is developed, it needs to be commercialized properly. From machinery manufacturer, we are fully flexible and open to new challenges, but we need to work together on this.
Yeah, I mean, just to reiterate, I think it's all about collaboration and coming to the table with an open and creative mindset so that we can solve the challenge at hand.
For me, being able to get someone from every element of the supply chain, I think it took about 2 days to put the panel together. So that tells me, again, we're talking about a tailwind, not a headwind. There are needs, there are capabilities, and it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when and how. So pleasure to be with you guys. Thank you so much for your expertise and your insights. Thanks to PODD, and we'll see the rest of you throughout the afternoon.